Exactly at midnight, the relentless heartbeat of New York City suddenly came to a halt in a single jolt. America's busiest and most vibrant metropolis was instantly paralyzed. The moment the clock struck 12, the sound and energy of the city were replaced by a strange, frightening, and deeply unsettling silence. Penn Station, known globally for its nonstop energy, was now filled with silence. The tracks lay completely empty, and the departure board displayed an unprecedented message: no passengers. This chilling silence was not a technical failure. North America's largest commuter rail network, the Long Island Railroad, had completely and indefinitely shut down. The largest commuter rail network was paralyzed, transforming ghost trains into symbols of routes that would no longer carry anyone to their destinations. This shutdown was a terrifying storm that arrived at midnight, but the warning signs had been echoing for months behind closed doors. No one truly tried to stop it. The immediate impact was devastating, affecting a massive population dependent on the LIRR for their daily lives. 250,000 people depend on this network every single day. They suddenly found themselves stranded, forced to wander the streets without direction. Commuters had no idea how they would reach their office desks, their hospital wards, or even return home in the evening, throwing the entire city's routine into chaos. The scale of this shutdown was historic, forcing a major metropolitan area to its knees. For the first time in 30 long years, the first time since the brief strike of 1994, an entire transportation system had come to a complete standstill in one blow. Heavy police presence was deployed everywhere. Iron barricades and roll-down gates were slammed shut, leaving disappointed fans helplessly staring at the empty platforms. The true reason behind this crisis runs much deeper and is far more complicated than a few trains stopping. This is the story of a long, silent, and painful battle between a rigid system and the exhausted people who tirelessly keep it running. At midnight, it wasn't one or two, but 5 different labor unions who stopped working together at the exact same time, demonstrating powerful solidarity. This sudden stoppage highlighted the critical role of the unseen workforce that forms the backbone of the entire rail system. These unions included the locomotive engineers, machinists, and signalmen, making up nearly half of the entire workforce essential for operations. Without these dedicated and often unseen workers, not even the smallest wheel of the system can move, rendering the entire network useless. But the biggest question remains: how did things reach this critical point? How did negotiations break down so completely? The night New York's rail heart stopped is a story of infrastructure, dependence, and the painful consequences of ignoring the voices that keep the city moving. The MTA strike has brought the entire rail network to a halt. But what really led to this massive conflict? And who is carrying the real burden? The direct answer to why this is happening is 3 long, exhausting years of waiting. For the past 3 years, these workers had been without a new contract. Despite their dedication to running the trains every day, skyrocketing inflation, medical bills, and the rising cost of living had pushed them to a breaking point. Their demand was simple: fair compensation for their hard work. But months of closed-door discussions failed to produce any real outcome. They sought a reasonable and respectable wage that matched their sweat and commitment to the rail network. Months of intense negotiations behind closed doors couldn't bridge the gap, leading to the current crisis. The MTA, the massive public agency operating the rail network, tells a completely different story about the failed negotiations. According to the MTA chairman, the unions were offered everything they had asked for in terms of pay. In the MTA's view, the strike had already been planned by the unions from the beginning, and the wage dispute was simply an excuse. But on the other side, the pain and boiling anger of the workers tell a very different story of struggle. The emotional words of a veteran employee who has spent years operating trains are now echoing through the air, speaking of their hardship. He expressed genuine sorrow for the painful situation and regretted the hardship passengers are facing, but the distance between both sides has grown miles apart. Negotiations have completely collapsed. Legally, the workers were free to strike, and they chose what they believed was the last remaining option. And who is carrying the real burden of this massive conflict? The everyday commuters who rely on the rail network. If this strike drags on, the streets of New York and Long Island could descend into a traffic nightmare so severe that even imagining it feels terrifying. While some can work remotely, millions of essential workers, like those in construction, healthcare, and education, cannot and must show up no matter what. Commuters are not only afraid of failing to reach work. If workers' salaries increase, the financial impact will eventually land directly on the shoulders of passengers. The fear of train fares rising by as much as 8% is already haunting ordinary people at night. Everyone is struggling under this crushing inflation, whether it's the worker driving the train engine or the ordinary citizen riding inside it. While ordinary people live in fear about what tomorrow may bring, inside the high halls of power, a dangerous political blame game has begun over the transit strike. For the ordinary commuter standing in the cold, this is a painful and very real reality. The system has completely fallen apart. Inside the air-conditioned halls of power, a political blame game has erupted, diverting attention from the crisis at hand. The state governor has launched serious allegations, pointing the finger directly at a high-profile target. The governor is directly blaming the Trump administration for this entire disaster and the fallout of the strike. According to the allegations, critical mediation efforts were abruptly halted by the Trump administration. It is further claimed that the situation was deliberately allowed to spiral toward a strike, causing maximum disruption. On the other side, Trump quickly fired back, mounting a fierce defense against the governor's claims. He insisted that he had absolutely nothing to do with the strike, completely rejecting the governor's accusations. Instead, he called the governor incompetent and openly backed one of her major political opponents. Elections are rapidly approaching, transforming this crisis into a major battleground for political survival. With elections on the horizon, the stakes are incredibly high for both sides involved in this public dispute. The valuable votes of Long Island could determine whether powerful political careers survive or collapse in the coming months. For politicians, this transit strike has become a golden political issue, weaponized for electoral gain. But for the ordinary commuter, standing outside the station in the cold, the strike is a painful and very real reality, not just a political talking point. Those empty and silent trains are no longer just machines. They have become living symbols of a failed and disconnected system. Both sides remain firmly locked into their positions, with neither willing to take even a single step back to resolve the crisis. The clock keeps ticking, and the entire city is holding its breath, desperately waiting for a miracle to end the suffering. The clock is ticking, but for now, there is no light visible at the end of this long and incredibly dark tunnel. No hope remains. There is only a deep silence, a silence that feels far more terrifying than any deafening noise the city has ever known.